month, a guy drove into my shop in a 2019 Honda CR-V that barely made it to the bay. Engine knocking, fuel system sputtering, the whole thing running like it was about to die. I popped the hood and immediately smelled something that wasn't gasoline. Something chemical. Something wrong. I asked the owner what happened. He pulled out his phone and showed me a YouTube video he'd watched 3 days earlier that promised a simple household chemical mixed into the gas tank would improve fuel economy by 30%. He'd followed the instructions exactly. Put the recommended amount straight into a half-full tank. Drove it for 2 days before everything started falling apart. That simple household chemical cost him $6,200. New fuel pump, new injectors, new fuel pressure regulator, complete fuel rail cleaning, and 2 days of labor. His warranty was void because the damage was self-inflicted. And the video he followed? It's still up online right now with 4 million views and barely a single comment warning people what it actually does to their engine. This is the reality of putting random fluids into your fuel tank based on internet advice. People destroy engines every single day following tips that sound logical but are chemically incompatible with modern fuel systems. I've been rebuilding fuel systems and diagnosing contamination damage for over 30 years. I've seen mechanics dump things into gas tanks they had no business touching. I've seen owners follow advice from neighbors, forums, YouTube videos, and garage mechanics that turned a $2,000 car into a scrapyard candidate overnight. And I've seen the exact opposite, too. I've seen the right fluids used correctly actually restore engine performance and prevent damage that would cost thousands to repair later. The difference between what destroys your engine and what helps it comes down to chemistry, concentration, and understanding what's actually happening inside your fuel system. Today, I'm going to reveal the 7 specific fluids that people regularly pour into their gas tanks that cause catastrophic damage to fuel systems and engines. For each one, I'll explain exactly what goes wrong chemically, so you understand why it destroys things rather than just taking my word for it. Then, I'll cover the 3 fluids that genuinely work, why they work, and how to use them correctly without crossing the line into damaged territory. This information could save you thousands of dollars and spare you the experience my CR-V customer went through last month. Tell me right now in the comments whether you have ever put anything other than gasoline or diesel into your fuel tank. No judgment. I want to know how common this actually is among real vehicle owners, and if someone you know has done this, tag them in the comments because they need to watch this video before their next trip to the parts store. Subscribe and like this video right now because what I'm about to share contradicts a lot of popular advice online, and protecting your engine from self-inflicted damage is genuinely important. Let's start with the most dangerous fluid people put in their gas tanks, and it happens to be one of the most commonly recommended home remedies on the entire internet. Fluid number 1 is acetone, which is the active ingredient in nail polish remover. The claim floating around online is that adding a small amount of acetone to your fuel tank improves combustion efficiency and increases fuel economy by anywhere from 15 to 30%. This claim has been repeated so many times across so many platforms that it feels like established fact to people who haven't looked into the actual chemistry. Here's what actually happens. Acetone is a ketone solvent with a boiling point of 133 degrees Fahrenheit. Gasoline contains complex hydrocarbon molecules that your engine is specifically designed to atomize, vaporize, and burn in precise ratios with air. Acetone is not a hydrocarbon. It doesn't burn the same way. It doesn't provide the same energy density. And most critically, it dissolves rubber. Every seal, hose, and gasket in your fuel system is made from rubber compounds specifically rated for hydrocarbon exposure. Acetone attacks these materials aggressively. At low concentrations, acetone swells and softens rubber components over time. Fuel pump seals begin leaking internally, reducing pump output gradually. Injector O-rings swell and lose their seal, causing fuel to leak past them into the combustion chamber at wrong times. Fuel line inner linings begin breaking down. releasing rubber particles into the fuel stream that clog injectors and fuel filters. None of this happens immediately. It develops over days and weeks. By the time you notice symptoms, the damage is widespread and expensive. The Honda CR-V customer I mentioned in the opening had poured acetone following a YouTube recipe. 3 days later, the fuel pump was delivering inadequate pressure because its internal seals had swollen shut. The injectors were leaking fuel constantly because their O-rings had expanded, and rubber debris from the fuel line was clogging the injector orifices. All of this damage from a fluid that costs $2 at any drugstore. Fluid number 2 is hydrogen peroxide. This one surfaces periodically in online forums with claims that adding hydrogen peroxide to gasoline increases oxygen content in the combustion mixture, burning fuel more completely and producing more power. The logic sounds reasonable on the surface. More oxygen should mean better combustion, right? The problem is that hydrogen peroxide is an extremely unstable oxidizer that can detonate under the wrong conditions. Automotive-grade hydrogen peroxide used in racing fuel systems is extremely diluted and specifically formulated for controlled mixing. The household hydrogen peroxide you buy at the pharmacy is 3% concentration, which sounds low but is still dangerously reactive when introduced to hot engine components and combustion pressures. Inside a fuel tank, hydrogen peroxide can decompose into water and oxygen gas. The oxygen bubbles reduce the effective volume of liquid fuel reaching the engine. The water contaminates the remaining fuel, and under certain conditions involving heat, vibration, and contact with metal surfaces inside the fuel system, hydrogen peroxide can react violently. I've never personally seen hydrogen peroxide cause a detonation in a passenger vehicle fuel tank because most people use small amounts. But I have seen it cause flash boiling events inside fuel injectors when the hot injector nozzle contacts hydrogen peroxide-contaminated fuel. The peroxide flashes to steam instantly inside the tiny injector orifice, creating a momentary pressure spike that damages the injector needle and seat. Multiple injectors failed on a Dodge Charger that came through my shop after the owner added hydrogen peroxide based on form advice. 2 injectors were destroyed. 2 more were damaged enough to require replacement. $4,000 in injector damage from a fluid that cost 50 cents. Fluid number 3 is water. This one might seem obvious, but water contamination is more common than you'd think, and sometimes people introduce it deliberately. Some older advice suggests that small amounts of water added to the fuel tank help cool combustion and prevent knock. This advice made marginal sense with carbureted engines running rich mixtures in the 1970s. It makes absolutely no sense with modern fuel injection, direct injection, and computer-controlled combustion management. Water in a fuel tank does several destructive things simultaneously. First, water is denser than gasoline and sinks to the bottom of the tank where the fuel pickup is located. When the fuel pump draws from the bottom, it pulls water first. Water doesn't burn. It doesn't provide energy. It just gets pushed through the fuel system as dead weight. Second, water causes phase separation in ethanol-blended fuels, which is virtually all gasoline sold today in most markets. When water contacts the ethanol mixed into gasoline, the ethanol preferentially dissolves in the water and separates from the gasoline into a distinct water-ethanol layer at the tank bottom. This layer is extremely corrosive to fuel system metals and can dissolve zinc, aluminum, and steel components inside pumps, injectors, and fuel rails. Third, water that reaches the combustion chamber creates thermal shock. Liquid water hitting hot combustion surfaces flashes to steam instantly, expanding to 1,600 times its liquid volume in microseconds. This explosive expansion hammers pistons, valves, and cylinder walls. A single large water slug entering the combustion chamber can bend a connecting rod or crack a piston. This is called hydrolock, and it destroys engines completely in severe cases. Fluid number 4 is pure ethanol, or methanol, added beyond what's already in commercial gasoline. Some performance enthusiasts add straight ethanol or methanol to boost octane and cooling effect inside the combustion chamber. There is legitimate science behind this in racing applications with engines specifically tuned for higher alcohol content. But in a standard passenger vehicle running on commercially blended gasoline, adding pure ethanol or methanol creates serious problems. The primary issue is material compatibility. Your fuel system seals, hoses, and gaskets are rated for the specific ethanol concentration present in commercial fuel, typically up to 10% in E10 or up to 15% in E15, dramatically increasing the alcohol concentration beyond what the system was designed for attacks rubber components similarly to acetone, though through different chemistry. Ethanol is also hygroscopic, meaning it absorbs moisture from the air aggressively. Adding pure ethanol to your tank increases the system's ability to pull water from ambient humidity, making phase separation more likely, not less. Additionally, your engine's fuel maps, ignition timing, and air-fuel ratio calculations are calibrated for a specific fuel chemistry. Changing the fuel composition significantly throws off these calculations. The computer delivers fuel amounts based on assumptions about the fuel's energy content and stoichiometric ratio. Pure ethanol has 37% less energy density than gasoline. Adding significant amounts of it without recalibrating the engine management system creates dangerously lean combustion conditions that can melt pistons or burn exhaust valves. Fluid number 5 is cooking oil or vegetable oil. This one appears regularly in discussions about biodiesel and alternative fuels, and there's legitimate science behind biodiesel production from vegetable oils. But there is a critical distinction between properly manufactured biodiesel, which has undergone a specific chemical process called transesterification, and raw cooking oil poured directly into a gasoline engine's fuel tank. Raw vegetable oil is not biodiesel. It is a completely different chemical substance. Raw cooking oil has a viscosity approximately 100 times greater than gasoline at operating temperature. Fuel injectors are precision instruments with orifice holes measured in thousandths of an inch. Pushing oil that thick through those tiny holes requires dramatically higher fuel pressure than your system provides. The injectors can't atomize the oil properly. Thick droplets hit the combustion chamber walls and pistons instead of creating a fine mist. These droplets burn incompletely, coating pistons and cylinder walls with carbon deposits. Over time, carbon buildup causes rings to stick, creating oil consumption and eventually catastrophic engine failure. I rebuilt a Ford F-150 last year that an owner had been adding cooking oil to for approximately 6 months, believing he was creating a biodiesel blend. The carbon deposits on the pistons were so thick they'd caused 2 rings to stick completely on one cylinder. The cylinder was scored from the pistons dragging without proper ring seal. Repair cost exceeded the vehicle's value at that mileage. Cooking oil did what cooking oil does. It coated everything and burned incompletely. Fluid number 6 is turpentine or mineral spirits. This recommendation dates back to the 1960s and 70s when some mechanics swore by adding a small amount of turpentine to the fuel tank to clean injectors and carburetors. In carbureted engines running rich, turpentine's solvent properties could dissolve some deposits inside the carburetor. But modern fuel injection systems operate on fundamentally different principles, and turpentine causes specific damage in these systems. Turpentine has a flash point significantly lower than gasoline, meaning it vaporizes and ignites at lower temperatures. Inside the combustion chamber, turpentine burns hotter and faster than gasoline, creating temperature spikes that exceed what the engine was designed to handle. Prolonged exposure to these temperature spikes damages exhaust valves, degrades valve seat surfaces, and can cause thermal fatigue in piston crowns. Turpentine also has poor lubricity compared to gasoline. Modern gasoline contains specific lubricity additives that protect fuel pump and injector components. Turpentine dilutes these additives, reducing the protective film on moving parts inside the fuel system. Fuel pump wear accelerates noticeably when turpentine contamination is present. Fluid number 7 is brake fluid. This one sounds absurd, and it is absurd, but I have personally seen it happen twice in my career. Both times the owner claimed they read somewhere that brake fluid, being a high boiling point liquid, could help clean the fuel system. Both times the result was identical and devastating. Brake fluid is glycol-based and chemically incompatible with virtually everything in a gasoline fuel system. It attacks rubber components even more aggressively than acetone. It contaminates gasoline so thoroughly that the mixture won't burn properly in any meaningful way. And the dissolved rubber debris it creates from attacking seals and hoses clogs injectors completely. The first time I encountered this was a Chevrolet Silverado where the owner had added approximately a cup of brake fluid. By the next morning, every fuel injector was clogged or damaged. The fuel pump had failed internally from seal deterioration. The fuel rail pressure regulator was leaking. Complete fuel system replacement was required at over $3,000. The second instance was similar with a Nissan Altima. Same result. Same complete destruction of the fuel delivery system. Never put brake fluid in a gasoline tank. There is no scenario where this makes sense. Now let me shift to the 3 fluids that actually work when used correctly, because the story isn't entirely negative. There are legitimate substances that improve fuel system performance, protect components, and solve real problems when applied at proper concentrations with proper understanding of what they do. The first fluid that genuinely works is isopropyl alcohol at very specific concentrations. Water contamination in fuel tanks causes problems I described earlier, including phase separation, corrosion, and potential hydrolock. Isopropyl alcohol acts as a co-solvent that bonds with water molecules and keeps them dissolved in the gasoline rather than allowing them to separate into a distinct layer at the tank bottom. The water-alcohol mixture then travels with the fuel through the system and exits through the exhaust as combustion byproduct. The critical detail here is concentration. Too little isopropyl alcohol, and it won't bind enough water to prevent phase separation. Too much, and you've introduced the same compatibility problems as adding pure ethanol, just with a different alcohol. The effective treatment range is approximately 1 ounce of isopropyl alcohol per 10 gallons of gasoline. At this ratio, isopropyl alcohol absorbs water effectively without overwhelming the fuel chemistry or attacking system components. Products like Heat Yellow Bottle are formulated isopropyl alcohol water removers designed specifically for this application, and using them as directed provides the correct concentration automatically. I've used this treatment successfully dozens of times on vehicles with confirmed water contamination, particularly after extended storage or in humid climates where moisture accumulates in partially filled tanks. The treatment is real, the chemistry is sound, and the results are measurable. Fuel delivery improves, rough running from water contamination disappears, and the risk of phase separation drops to essentially zero with periodic treatment. The second fluid that works is polyisobutylene amine, commonly abbreviated as PEA, at concentrated treatment doses. PEA is the active ingredient in the most effective fuel system cleaners available. It works through a mechanism called detergent action, where the PEA molecule has one end that bonds to carbon deposits and another end that's soluble in fuel. The molecule essentially wraps around carbon buildup, dissolves it, and carries it through the combustion process where it burns off with the fuel. Regular maintenance doses of PEA in products like Chevron Techron prevent deposit formation over time, but concentrated treatment doses, which are the one-time high-strength cleaners you can buy separately, actively remove existing carbon buildup from intake valves, combustion chambers, injectors, and intake ports. I've used concentrated PEA treatments on engines showing significant carbon deposits confirmed through borescope inspection. After treatment, Follow-up inspection consistently shows 30 to 60% reduction in deposits. This translates to restored fuel economy, improved combustion efficiency, and better overall engine performance. The key distinction making PEA effective where other substances fail is that PEA is specifically engineered to be compatible with every component in the fuel system. It doesn't attack rubber. It doesn't change combustion chemistry. It doesn't alter air-fuel ratios. It does exactly one thing extremely well, which is dissolving carbon deposits, and it does that thing without creating any secondary problems. This is the difference between a purpose-engineered chemical and a household product repurposed for an application it wasn't designed for. The third fluid that works is fuel stabilizer for vehicles that will be stored or driven infrequently. Gasoline degrades through oxidation when exposed to air over time. The light hydrocarbon compounds that make gasoline volatile evaporate first, leaving heavier compounds that form gums and varnish deposits inside the fuel system. This degradation happens within 30 days in an open tank and accelerates at higher temperatures. Fuel stabilizer contains antioxidant compounds that interrupt the oxidation chain reaction, keeping gasoline chemically stable for 6 to 12 months depending on the product and conditions. Products like STABIL work by providing antioxidant molecules that preferentially react with the oxygen dissolved in the fuel, preventing that oxygen from attacking the hydrocarbon molecules in the gasoline itself. The antioxidants sacrifice themselves to protect the fuel's chemical integrity. This is straightforward, well-understood chemistry that has been validated through decades of use in marine, agricultural, and automotive applications. Fuel stabilizer doesn't improve performance in regularly driven vehicles because fresh gasoline doesn't need protection. But for stored vehicles, seasonal equipment, or vehicles driven less than once per week, stabilizer prevents the gum and varnish formation that causes cold start problems, rough running, and eventual fuel system clogging. Now I want to address something that comes up constantly when people discuss fuel tank additives, and that's the question of how to evaluate whether something is safe to put in your fuel system versus something that will destroy it. The single most reliable indicator is whether the product was specifically formulated and tested for use in automotive fuel systems. Products manufactured by automotive chemical companies, sold through automotive retailers and labeled specifically for fuel system use have undergone compatibility testing with standard fuel system materials. They've been verified not to attack rubber seals, not to alter combustion chemistry dangerously, and not to create secondary problems. Household chemicals have not undergone this testing. Acetone is formulated for removing nail polish. Hydrogen peroxide is formulated for wound care or hair bleaching. Cooking oil is formulated for frying food. None of these products have been tested for compatibility with fuel system rubber compounds, injector precision components, or combustion chamber conditions. Using them in your fuel system is essentially conducting an uncontrolled experiment on your engine with your money at stake. The internet amplifies this problem enormously. A single video claiming that acetone improves fuel economy gets shared millions of times. The people sharing it aren't chemists or mechanics. They're repeating information they found compelling without understanding the chemistry behind why it's dangerous. By the time someone actually tries it and destroys their fuel system, they're one person among millions who watched the same video. The video stays up. The damage stays done. Understanding basic fuel system chemistry helps you evaluate any claim about what to put in your gas tank. Gasoline is a mixture of hydrocarbons specifically refined for automotive combustion. Your fuel system is engineered around this specific chemistry. Any substance you add to your tank must be compatible with hydrocarbon fuel chemistry, must not attack the rubber and metal components of your fuel delivery system, and must not alter the air-fuel ratio or combustion characteristics in ways your engine management system isn't designed to handle. If a substance fails any of these three criteria, it destroys something. Period. The 7 fluids I covered today all fail at least one of these criteria. Acetone and brake fluid attack rubber components. Hydrogen peroxide creates unstable chemical reactions. Water causes phase separation and hydrolock. Pure alcohols alter combustion chemistry beyond system tolerances. Cooking oil can't be atomized properly by injectors. Turpentine burns too hot and lacks lubricity. The three that work pass all three criteria because they were specifically designed and tested to do so. Let me close with a practical recommendation for protecting your fuel system going forward. First, never put anything in your gas tank that isn't specifically manufactured and labeled for automotive fuel system use. This eliminates acetone, hydrogen peroxide, cooking oil, turpentine, brake fluid, and any other household chemical regardless of what you read or watched online. Second, if you want to treat your fuel system, use products from reputable automotive chemical manufacturers and follow the dosage instructions exactly. Using more than recommended doesn't provide better results. It creates problems. Third, if you drive infrequently or store your vehicle seasonally, add fuel stabilizer before storage. Fourth, if you suspect water contamination, use a properly formulated isopropyl alcohol water remover at the recommended concentration. Fifth, run a concentrated P treatment through your engine once every 50,000 miles to keep carbon deposits under control and maintain optimal combustion efficiency. These 5 practices cost maybe $50 to $100 per year total. They protect components worth thousands of dollars. They maintain engine performance at factory specifications, and they eliminate the risk of self-inflicted damage that turns a minor maintenance situation into a catastrophic repair bill. Your fuel system is precision engineering, operating under extreme conditions. It deserves precision maintenance, not household experiments. Let me go deeper into the damage patterns each destructive fluid creates so you can recognize contamination symptoms if they ever appear. This diagnostic knowledge helps you identify problems early before minor contamination becomes catastrophic failure. Each fluid leaves a specific fingerprint in the damage it causes, and knowing these patterns helps mechanics and owners alike identify what went wrong and how to fix it. Acetone contamination leaves a very specific trail. The first symptom is usually intermittent fuel delivery problems. The fuel pump starts delivering inconsistently because its internal seals are swelling and restricting flow. You might notice a slight stumble at idle that comes and goes. Then, injector performance starts degrading as their O-rings swell. Fuel pressure at the rail drops below specification. Eventually, you might get a lean condition code from the engine computer because not enough fuel is reaching the cylinders despite the pump running. The definitive sign of acetone contamination is the smell. It has a distinctive sweet chemical odor that's noticeably different from gasoline. If your fuel system suddenly smells sweet and chemical rather than like normal gasoline, contamination has occurred. Hydrogen peroxide contamination presents differently. The initial symptom is often reduced fuel pressure because water released from peroxide decomposition settles at the bottom of the tank near the pickup. You might notice rough running after the tank has been sitting for several hours because water has settled. When you first start driving, the pump pulls water-contaminated fuel, creating misfires and rough operation that gradually improves as the water is consumed or mixed. If peroxide reacts inside an injector, you'll see sudden injector failure with specific symptoms. One cylinder consistently misfiring while others run fine. Replacing that injector temporarily fixes the problem until another one fails from the same contamination source. Water contamination creates the most dramatic symptom pattern. If water has collected as a distinct layer at the tank bottom and the fuel level drops to where the pickup draws from that layer, you'll experience sudden severe engine stumbling or complete stalling. The engine might start, run for a few seconds, then die. Repeated attempts to start produce the same result. If a large water slug enters the combustion chamber all at once, you might hear a loud bang, and the engine might stop immediately if hydrolock occurs. This is the scenario that bends connecting rods and destroys engines in seconds rather than weeks. Cooking oil contamination builds gradually and insidiously. The first symptom is usually increased fuel consumption because the thick oil isn't atomizing properly and burning inefficiently. Then you start noticing black smoke from the exhaust, particularly during acceleration when more fuel oil mixture enters the combustion chamber. Carbon deposits accumulate on spark plugs, causing misfires. Deposits build on injector tips, reducing their spray pattern precision. Eventually, cylinder compression drops from ring carbon sticking, and you have an engine that consumes oil, runs rough, and lacks power. By the time these symptoms appear prominently, the damage has been accumulating for months. Turpentine contamination shows up primarily as exhaust system and valve train damage over extended exposure. Exhaust valves run hotter than normal because turpentine burns at higher temperatures. You might notice a slight increase in exhaust temperature on gauge-equipped vehicles. Over months of contamination, exhaust valve faces begin pitting from thermal fatigue. Valve seats wear faster. Eventually, you develop a cylinder with a leaking exhaust valve that causes loss of compression and significant power reduction on that cylinder. This damage pattern is difficult to connect to turpentine contamination unless you know to look for it, because it mimics normal wear accelerated by high mileage or overheating. Now let me address the myths versus reality around fuel additives more broadly, because misconceptions drive most of the dangerous behavior I see. Myth number 1: more is better when it comes to fuel additives. Reality is the exact opposite. Every legitimate fuel additive has an optimal concentration range. Below this range, it doesn't work effectively. Above this range, it creates problems ranging from reduced performance to component damage. Concentrated PEA cleaner at treatment dose works wonderfully. The same product at 10 times the recommended dose attacks rubber components and disrupts combustion. Isopropyl alcohol at 1 ounce per 10 gallons removes water effectively. A full bottle dumped into a half tank of gas changes the fuel chemistry enough to cause lean burn and performance loss. Dosage precision matters enormously with fuel system chemicals. Myth number 2: if it's sold at an auto parts store, it's safe to put in your gas tank. This is generally true for products specifically labeled for fuel system use and manufactured by reputable companies. But auto parts stores also sell acetone, hydrogen peroxide, and other chemicals that are not safe for fuel systems. The location where you buy something tells you nothing about its compatibility with your fuel system. Only the product's specific formulation and intended use determine safety. Myth number 3: older engines need different treatment than newer engines. The fundamentals of fuel chemistry don't change based on engine age. Rubber is rubber, whether it's in a 2005 engine or a 2020 engine. Carbon deposits form the same way in any internal combustion engine. Water contamination causes the same damage regardless of engine vintage. What changes is the sensitivity of the fuel system to contamination. Newer engines with tighter tolerances and more sophisticated engine management are actually more sensitive to fuel contamination than older engines. A 2020 direct injection engine will be damaged by acetone contamination faster than a 1995 port injection engine, because the direct injection system has tighter clearances and more precise components. Myth number 4: you can tell if your fuel is contaminated by looking at it. Most contamination is invisible. Water in small quantities dissolves in ethanol-blended gasoline and looks exactly like clean fuel. Acetone is colorless and blends invisibly with gasoline. Cooking oil might be slightly visible as an oily film on the fuel surface if present in large quantities, but small amounts blend in. The only reliable way to detect most contamination is through symptom identification, fuel system pressure testing, or professional fuel sample analysis. Let me share additional case studies that illustrate exactly how these contamination scenarios play out in real vehicles. A 2017 Nissan Altima came into my shop with the owner completely baffled about why fuel economy had dropped from 32 miles per gallon to 22 over the span of about 2 months with no other obvious symptoms. No check engine light, no rough running, just steadily worsening fuel economy. I tested fuel pressure and found it reading correctly. Injector spray pattern testing showed all injectors firing properly. Everything appeared normal on the surface. I pulled a fuel sample and examined it closely. The fuel had a slightly different viscosity than normal gasoline, almost imperceptibly thicker. The owner admitted after some questioning that his neighbor had recommended adding cooking oil to improve lubrication of the fuel pump, claiming it would extend pump life. He'd been adding about 2 tablespoons per tank for roughly 2 months. 2 tablespoons sounds trivially small, but over multiple fill-ups in a 12-gallon tank, the cumulative effect was measurable. The cooking oil wasn't thick enough to cause visible contamination, but was enough to coat injector tips with a thin film that slightly degraded their spray pattern over time. The engine was burning fuel less efficiently because the atomization was impaired. Cleaning the injectors professionally restored fuel economy to 31 miles per gallon, and the problem didn't return after the owner stopped adding oil. Another case involved a 2020 Ford Mustang GT with a 5.0 V8 that developed a mysterious cylinder 6 misfire. The owner had no history of putting anything unusual in the fuel, but his girlfriend had used his car regularly for 2 months and had added hydrogen peroxide to the tank based on advice from a coworker who claimed it improved performance. The girlfriend didn't mention this to the owner because she didn't think it was significant. Cylinder 6's injector had been damaged by a flash boiling event when peroxide-contaminated fuel hit the hot injector nozzle. The injector needle was scored and couldn't seal properly, causing fuel to leak past it continuously. Replacement cost for a single performance injector on that engine was $380 plus diagnostic time. The girlfriend's well-intentioned treatment cost the owner over $500 total. A third case involved a classic 1969 Mustang restoration where the owner was trying to clean the fuel system after the car had been sitting for 15 years in a barn. Rather than having the tank professionally cleaned, he added turpentine to the tank and ran the engine repeatedly, believing the solvent would flush the system. He ran about 3 gallons of turpentine through the engine over several sessions. When the engine was finally disassembled for a rebuild, the exhaust valves showed accelerated seat wear, and 2 valves had visible pitting on their faces from the elevated combustion temperatures turpentine created. The valve seats required grinding, and 2 valves needed replacement. The turpentine cleaning cost him an extra $800 in valve work that wouldn't have been necessary with proper fuel tank cleaning methods. These cases share a common thread. Someone added a substance to the fuel system with good intentions based on advice that sounded reasonable. The advice was wrong. The substance caused specific, measurable damage. And the damage wasn't immediately obvious, developing gradually over days or weeks until symptoms appeared. By then, the contamination had done its work, and repair was necessary. If you discover that your fuel system has been contaminated, here's how to recover depending on the substance involved. For acetone or brake fluid contamination, which attack rubber components, the recovery process is more involved than simply draining and refilling the tank. You need to drain the tank completely and refill with clean fuel. Then run the engine at idle for 30 minutes with the fuel system circulating clean fuel through all components. This flushes residual contamination from the fuel lines and rail. After that, have the fuel injectors professionally cleaned or replaced if they show seal damage. Have the fuel pump pressure tested to verify it's delivering proper flow. Replace any fuel line sections that show softening or swelling from chemical attack. A complete recovery from acetone contamination might cost $200 to $500 depending on how much damage accumulated before discovery. For water contamination, drain as much fuel as possible from the tank. Add the recommended dose of isopropyl alcohol water remover. Refill with fresh gasoline. Run the engine through a full tank to flush the water-alcohol mixture through the system. If the engine ran rough or stalled from water contamination, have the injectors inspected for water damage. In severe cases where hydrolock occurred, the engine needs professional inspection for connecting rod, piston, and valve damage before being run again. For cooking oil contamination, the recovery requires professional injector cleaning at minimum. The oil deposits on injector tips and inside combustion chambers don't flush out with normal fuel flow. Professional ultrasonic injector cleaning removes oil residue from the precision components. Drain the tank, clean the injectors, refill with clean fuel, and run a concentrated P treatment to clean carbon deposits that formed from incomplete oil combustion in the cylinders. If contamination was prolonged, a borescope inspection of the cylinders before and after treatment confirms deposit removal. For hydrogen peroxide contamination, drain the tank and refill with clean fuel. Test each injector individually for proper spray pattern and flow rate. Replace any injector showing damage from flash boiling events. Run the engine with clean fuel for a full tank to flush any remaining peroxide from the system. Peroxide decomposes relatively quickly once introduced to the fuel system, so the contamination source is eliminated by draining and refilling. The damage it caused, however, requires inspection and potential injector replacement. Understanding recovery procedures matters because contamination sometimes happens without the vehicle owner's knowledge or consent. Shared vehicles, borrowed cars, and vehicles maintained by others can be contaminated without the owner ever learning what was added. If your vehicle suddenly develops fuel system symptoms with no explanation, contamination should be on your diagnostic checklist alongside the more common causes like bad sensors and failing pumps. Let me provide precise dosage guidance for the 3 fluids that actually work, so there's zero ambiguity about how to use them correctly. For isopropyl alcohol water remover, the correct ratio is 1 ounce per 10 gallons of gasoline for preventive treatment when you suspect moisture accumulation. For active water removal after confirmed contamination, use 2 ounces per 10 gallons one time, then revert to the preventive ratio. Never exceed 2 ounces per 10 gallons, regardless of how much water you think is present. If contamination is severe enough that 2 ounces per 10 gallons doesn't resolve symptoms, the problem requires professional fuel system cleaning and tank inspection, rather than additional alcohol treatment. For concentrated PEA fuel system cleaner, follow the specific product's dosage instructions exactly. Most concentrated treatments specify 1 full bottle per full tank of gasoline, used once every 50,000 miles as a treatment interval. Using it more frequently than recommended provides no additional benefit because carbon deposits reform at a rate determined by engine operation, not by how often you clean. Running P cleaner continuously at maintenance dose in regular gasoline provides ongoing deposit prevention. Using concentrated treatment dose periodically removes existing deposits. Both approaches have value but serve different purposes. For fuel stabilizer, the standard ratio is 1 ounce per 2.5 gallons of gasoline for vehicles that will be stored for 30 days or more. For extended storage beyond 6 months, use 2 ounces per 2.5 gallons and fill the tank completely before storage. A completely full tank minimizes the airspace above the fuel where moisture can condense and where oxidation begins. Stabilizer works best when added to fresh, clean gasoline. Adding it to fuel that has already begun degrading provides limited benefit because the oxidation products already formed can't be reversed by antioxidants. Vehicle-specific considerations matter when choosing and using fuel treatments. Turbocharged engines are particularly sensitive to fuel system contamination because turbocharger boost amplifies any combustion abnormalities. Lean conditions from contaminated fuel become more dangerous in turbocharged engines because boost pressures increase cylinder pressures and temperatures. Any contamination that causes lean burn in a naturally aspirated engine causes significantly more dangerous lean burn in a turbocharged engine. Be especially careful about what enters your fuel tank if your vehicle has forced induction. Direct injection engines, which are now standard in most new vehicles, have fuel injectors operating at pressures between 2,000 and 3,000 psi. At these pressures, any contamination that affects injector spray pattern or tip condition causes proportionally larger combustion problems than the same contamination in a lower pressure port injection system. The precision required at these pressures means even minor injector damage from chemical contamination significantly affects engine performance and efficiency. Diesel engines have their own unique vulnerability to fuel contamination. Diesel fuel has specific lubricity properties that protect fuel pump and injector components. Anything that dilutes or changes the diesel's lubricity characteristics accelerates wear in the high-pressure fuel system, which operates at even higher pressures than gasoline direct injection, sometimes exceeding 23,000 psi in modern common rail systems. Never add gasoline, cooking oil, or any non-diesel substance to a diesel fuel tank. The consequences in diesel systems are faster and more expensive than in gasoline engines because the fuel system components are more expensive and more precisely manufactured. Before that final point, let me address something related but separate from contamination that affects fuel system health just as significantly. The quality of the gasoline you buy at the pump varies enormously between stations and brands. Top-tier gasoline, which includes brands like Shell, Chevron, Costco, and others certified by the top-tier program, contains higher concentrations of deposit-preventing detergents than non-top-tier brands. The difference isn't marketing. It's measurable. Engines running top-tier fuel consistently show less carbon buildup than identical engines running non-top-tier fuel under the same conditions. This has been confirmed through independent testing by automotive manufacturers and research institutions. Using top-tier fuel is the single most effective passive measure you can take to maintain fuel system and engine health. It's not an additive you pour in. It's simply choosing where to buy your fuel. The price difference between top-tier and non-top-tier at any given location is typically minimal, often a few cents per gallon at most. But the long-term difference in deposit formation is substantial. If you're spending money on fuel system cleaners and additives but buying cheap fuel from unknown sources, you're fighting a losing battle. The deposits you're cleaning reform faster than they would if you simply bought better fuel in the first place. The relationship between fuel quality and the need for additives is important context for this entire discussion. High-quality top-tier fuel with proper detergent packages reduces the need for aftermarket PEA cleaners because the fuel itself is already preventing deposits actively. In an ideal world, you'd never need to add anything to your fuel tank if you consistently purchased quality fuel from reputable sources. Additives become necessary when fuel quality is poor, when the vehicle has been neglected, or when specific problems like water contamination need to be addressed. Understanding this relationship helps you make smarter decisions about what your fuel system actually needs versus what's simply being marketed to you. Let me also address two more myths that perpetuate dangerous fuel tank behavior. Myth number 5 states that if a substance doesn't immediately cause problems, it must be safe. This is perhaps the most dangerous assumption people make about fuel system chemistry. Every destructive fluid I covered today causes damage gradually rather than instantly. Acetone swells rubber over days. Cooking oil deposits carbon over weeks. Turpentine damages valves over months. The absence of immediate symptoms doesn't indicate safety. It indicates that damage is accumulating invisibly until it reaches a threshold where symptoms finally appear. By that point, the financial damage far exceeds what it would have cost to avoid the contamination entirely. Myth number 6 claims that gasoline engines and diesel engines have the same tolerance for foreign substances. They absolutely do not. Diesel fuel systems operate at dramatically higher pressures than gasoline systems, with modern common rail diesel injectors functioning at pressures exceeding 20,000 psi. At these pressures, any contamination that affects fuel viscosity, lubricity, or atomization characteristics causes damage orders of magnitude faster than the same contamination in a gasoline system. Diesel injector replacement costs range from $300 to over $1,000 per injector depending on the engine. A single contamination event in a diesel fuel system can destroy multiple injectors simultaneously. The precision tolerances in diesel fuel systems leave virtually zero margin for error with fuel chemistry. One final point about fuel system health that ties everything together. Everything else is either a carefully engineered additive formulated for compatibility or a foreign substance that creates damage. The automotive engineers who designed your fuel system spent years optimizing every component for compatibility with standard commercial fuel. They did not design it for acetone, hydrogen peroxide, cooking oil, or any other household chemical. Respecting that engineering by keeping unauthorized substances out of your fuel tank is the single most effective way to maintain fuel system longevity and avoid the kind of expensive self-inflicted damage I repair regularly in my shop. Subscribe for more content that separates automotive fact from fiction and protects your investment from bad advice. Like if this video prevented you from trying something dangerous you'd seen recommended online. Comment with any other fluids or treatments you've seen recommended for gas tanks that you're wondering about. I'll tell you directly whether it's safe or whether it will destroy your engine. Share this with anyone who's ever considered adding acetone, hydrogen peroxide, or anything else questionable to their fuel tank. The information in this video might save them thousands of dollars and spare them the kind of damage I see in my shop every single month from people who thought they were helping their engine.